Welcome back, creative enthusiasts. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of Wordmark design. This is one of my favorite aspects of graphic design, and especially of branding, because I think it's so critically important that the Wordmark accurately reflects the brand identity. So in this video, we're gonna walk through a custom logotype that I created, and we're gonna go character by character and talk about how I crafted each individual letter form. I haven't seen a lot of content like this on YouTube, so let me be your guide in how we can create better Wordmark designs. Let's dive into the video. When it comes to creating a strong brand identity, the Wordmark is one of the most critical components of that toolkit. Now in a minute, we're going to dive into this Wordmark design for Agent Inc. I love this one, it's super custom. I built every single letter from scratch, so you'll never find a typeface that looks like this. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but before I dive into the Wordmark design itself, I want to just touch on why it's so important. A logo Wordmark is the first thing customers will read about your business. So it's critical that it upholds and supports the brand values and mission that you're trying to portray. One thing I see a ton in the design industry is designers getting really caught up on the logo mark and the color palette, and they don't spend any time paying attention to the word mark. They just find a typeface they think looks cool, they type out the name of the business, and they think that is good to go. But when you do that, you're missing such a critical piece of what can be the most awesome and long-standing part of your brand identity. Just like your logo mark is the unique identifier for your business in icon form, your word mark is the unique identifier for your business in word form. So that's why I'm passionate about it. I wanted to create this video to show you how I go about creating custom word marks. So let's dive in to this word mark for Agent Inc. Now that we've got that established and we have a baseline for why word mark designs are important and why you should make them consistent with the rest of your brand, I want to go ahead and talk about the Agent Inc. project that we're diving into here. I want to show you Agent Inc.'s original logo design. I'm going to walk you through my process of how I got from here to here. Now, when Agent Inc. started, they were particularly geared towards the gamer profile. So this logo design made a lot of sense because it kind of has that sci-fi gaming feel. But as the brand progressed, they found themselves with more and more customers that were streamers or VTubers, and they didn't really fit the gamer aesthetic that their brand was giving off. So this customer shift has caused their brand to not be relevant. It was time for a rebrand, and they wanted something that still talked to the sci-fi gamer audience, but also had roots in the Japanese anime culture that many of their customers were akin to. When the project kicked off, they gave me this mood board of things that they liked, which as you can see has a lot of Japanese culture in it, a lot of the anime culture, Japanese characters, so I knew that was going to be critically important. But they also wanted their brand to feel a little bit more feminine. They were using a purple and blue color palette, which you see in the logo design, and this obviously is a lot more black and white than what they were really going for, but it kind of spoke to the mood or the essence of what they wanted to create. Now obviously the word mark had to be in English, not in Japanese, so I went ahead and created my own mood board of different typefaces that I felt kind of reflected the same vibe or aesthetic that they were originally going for. Now typically I do like to start with a typeface and then make modifications from there, but I couldn't find anything for this brand that really tackled the aesthetic of what I wanted to capture. Every typeface that I had on my mood board was too futuristic, it was too sci-fi, and it made it so that you couldn't read the word mark. Obviously if you're going to create a word mark, it has to be legible, and it has to be legible at small sizes and large sizes. That's like one of the key components. So nothing was going to work if I couldn't quickly identify what the letter forms were. On top of that, everything was very sharp and angular, and one of the problems that I had was that felt very masculine. It felt like it needed that stark black and white color contrast, and I wanted something softer, something that was a little bit more approachable and would play in a little bit more to the anime culture that so many of their customers were familiar with. So when you can't find a typeface to work as the base, and I spent hours looking for a typeface that I could use as a base for this Wordmark design. I couldn't find one. So I went to the drawing board. I started sketching my own idea of what this typeface should look like based on all of the inspiration that I had gathered. After lots of sketching and iterations, this is the sketch that I came up with, and I decided I'm going to build this typeface. Based on the mood boards, I knew this needed to be a sans serif typeface. I knew that it needed to have some rounded edges and softer characters. And I also knew that it needed to feel futuristic and sci-fi without compromising any sort of legibility. For this project, I chose to use a 30 by 30 grid. So all of the letter forms are in kind of a base 30 format. That could vary. So maybe my grid boxes would be 20 by 20, 40 by 40, but I chose 30 by 30 for this exercise because it seemed like it felt the best to me. So you'll notice I set up boxes that are 30 pixels by 30 pixels, and I made that my grid on which I was going to build every single letter. I like to make my grids a little bit smaller than the actual letters. Using a 30 pixel grid here, 30 pixels by 30 pixels for each of the boxes, then my bars were 90 pixels, so they were 3 boxes long. And if you want to be a good logotype designer, you need to fundamentally understand typeface design. So go and study typeface design. I'm not going to get into all of the details on how to design a good typeface in this video, but one of the things that you definitely need to know, vertical bars in your letter forms, they need to be a little bit thicker than your horizontal bar. The reason for this is because there's an optical illusion, since we as humans have 2 eyes, that we actually pinch any vertical line while expanding or seeing horizontally any horizontal line, because it's on the same plane as our eyes. So those lines look a little bit thicker than vertical lines that are pinched with our eyes. It's an optical illusion. So you'll notice if you measure my boxes that these boxes aren't actually 30 by 30, they're actually 30 by 31. That means any vertical line in this Wordmark is not actually 90 pixels, it's actually 93 pixels. And that's really important because it helps the Wordmark feel optically balanced. If it wasn't 93 pixels, if it was 90 pixels and the horizontal bars would be 90 pixels, it wouldn't look right. You'll see this in certain letter forms such as the T. It looks like both bars are the same size, but they're really not. It's just an optical illusion. So now that I had my 30 by 31 pixel grid set up, I was ready to go ahead and start creating each of the different letters. Now I would love to say that I got it right the first time, but that's never the way things work. So I created many iterations of different letter forms, and throughout this process I compared and contrasted different letters to see which ones looked the best. Now I don't have time to talk about each of the different alternative options that I explored and why I chose the one I chose, but I do want to talk about the final Wordmark design and what's so great about it, why it works, and the details in the individual letter forms. First of all, if you look at this brand as a whole, it does have that soft, approachable feel with the rounded letters, but it still gives off that sci-fi element. That's because we have really unique characters in here, such as the N and the T and the K, which make this Wordmark feel space age without compromising any sort of legibility. Now, starting at the very beginning, we have the star icon, which I utilized as a piece of this Wordmark to really give it some uniqueness. It also means that we can pull the A out and use just the A as an icon itself with the star, and the star symbolizes that space age commitment to continue to dream and reach for the stars. Here you can see how each of these letters is built on the 30 pixel by 30 pixel grid, or I should say 30 pixel by 31 pixel grid, because on the A here you can see that the horizontal line is only 90 pixels, but the vertical lines, or the bottom of the A, is 93 pixels, so it feels a little bit wider. And then we have the rounded form of the A itself. And everything you can see is in some sort of increment of 30. This is very, very mathematical and precise. The curvature at the top of the A is a 150 pixel corner. So that's 30 times 5, right? Inside corner is 60 pixels. It's 30 times 2. This technique is called nesting your corners, and whenever you have two curves on the same corner, you want the roundness of the inside curve equal the roundness of the outside curve minus the distance between the two. In this case, we have a 150 pixel round corner on the outside edge. Then we have 3 blocks worth, 3 30 pixel by 30 pixel blocks in distance between that curve on the outside and the curve on the inside. So that means we have a total of 90 pixels between the outside edge of the outside curve and the inside curve. So what we need to do is take 150, subtract 90, and we get the amount of 60, which then becomes the curvature amount of the inside circle. This is really easy to see and figure out. Obviously, it doesn't look right if one corner is curved and the other is angled. That just doesn't work with our eye. So we have to curve that corner in at some capacity. So we have to figure out what looks right to the eye in that curvature. Well, there's a very easy way to do this. It's simply take the curvature of the exterior curve and subtract the distance between the two. In this case, you can clearly see that we have a 150 pixel round curve on the outside. Now we know we have 3 blocks of space on all of the bars in this entire word mark, so that equals 90 pixels of space between the outside corner and the inside corner. So if I utilize the corners tool on Illustrator, I can simply type in 60 pixels and I'll get a perfectly nested curve right in that corner. Corner nesting is really important to understand for all types of layout design, but obviously in this scenario, also very critical to the word mark itself. Similarly, moving down to the bottom part of this A, we have a posterior curve that's 30 pixels to give it a little bit of softness and mimic the exterior curve at the top of the A. I also took the A bar and I moved it up about half, so it is still 90 pixels, but it splits the difference in the grid. That just optically balanced the space because you always want that A bar to be a little bit lower than the midline. You don't want it to be up at the midline. It just doesn't look right to your eye. As we move down the word mark, the G utilizes the same exact curvature that the A utilizes, so this helps build consistency and make the letter forms really feel like they're all part of the same family. If you're going to utilize a curve, you want to make sure you're consistently utilizing the same curves. Interestingly enough, the E is an example of when that was not necessarily the case. Here on the E, you can see that we actually have a 30 pixel curve on the inside and a 120 curve on the outside. Again, 30 pixels plus 90 or 120 minus 90 gives us those curve numbers, so we know exactly what we need to have mathematically for those curves. But for this E, we didn't have enough space between the top bar and the middle bar of the E to be able to curve to a 60-degree curve like what we did in the A. We only have 30 pixels of space. We have one box of space between the top bar and the middle bar, so we're only allowed a 30 pixel curve. Because of that, it would look really weird to our eye if the exterior curve was 150. So instead, this curve on the E is actually just a little bit sharper than the other letter forms. However, because it's still based on 30 pixels and there's other 30 pixel curves within this word mark, namely over on the A we just saw, it still works and it still feels like it's part of that same family. As we move to the end, you'll notice we have the first diagonal line of this word mark. Diagonal lines are always a little bit weird. You kind of have to play with them to make them look right. In this word mark, I found that if I made them half the distance between the horizontal and the vertical lines, again, vertical lines 93 pixels, horizontal lines 90 pixels, I split the difference with a 91.5 pixels, and that looked like it was visually balanced to me. And then I tilted my angled lines on a 30-degree axis. This isn't always the way that you want to do this, but in this case, it worked to really give it that sci-fi feel. I angled it significantly more than I usually would have, so I gave it a negative 30-degree angle and then lowered that bar of the N all the way down to the bottom. The bottom of the diagonal bar of the N hits exactly 90 pixels above the bottom of the N's foot. This point is obviously exactly consistent with the foot of the E. This helps with the visual balance, creates synergy between all of these different letters. As we move to the T, I have to say I really enjoyed building out the letter T because I got to do something really unique. I wanted to give the T some sort of form that felt consistent with the rest of the brand. something that was a little bit round. T's traditionally aren't round. There's no round aspect of a T. So I chose to actually bend the vertical bar of the T, and I bent it at the same degree as what I had done with the other letter forms, such as the A and the G. So you'll see this is a 150 curve and a 60 curve on that T-bar as it kind of comes around and it morphs into the hat or the top part of the T. At this point, your head might be swimming, so you're probably thinking, thank goodness the I is so simple, and we get to use the N a second time, so we already talked about that. The last character I want to talk about is that K. In this word mark, the K is like the grand finale. It has to pull everything together. It has to reflect the A at the start. It has to balance the rest of the word mark, and that's not an easy challenge. On top of that, Ks are extremely unique. There's a lot of different ways to make a capital K. To make this K really pull everything together, you'll notice that I actually used the same degree angle, mirrored 30-degree angle, on the diagonal line for the K, and then on the bottom of the K, to pull the whole thing together, to pull in the A and the G and the E, I used that curvature that I had been using in the rest of the word mark. So this is where we start to create a lot of synergy because there was no curves in the word ink, so we got to use that in the K, and we got to bend that bottom foot of the K with the 150 pixel corner and the 60 pixel corner that every other letter that's rounded is using in this word mark. Again, that center bar hits exactly 90 pixels above the bottom, so that helps build the connection visually between the K and the N. And in the end, using all of these math equations like that to build out the word mark is what creates the synergy between all of the different letter forms. Lastly, I kerned the entire word mark to make it feel like every letter was spaced roughly 30 pixels apart, but obviously with kerning, no letter is spaced the same. I'm going to create an entire video on kerning so you can learn how to do that properly, but in this case, every letter is kerned perfectly. All together, this creates this emphatic, consistent, sci-fi, friendly, fun word mark for a brand that needs to reflect that to their new customer base. And this is why I love word mark design. You'll never find anything that looks exactly the same, and the clients loved it. So I hope that this journey was extremely helpful for you in learning a little bit about my process and how I create something like this. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up on YouTube and let me know in the comments what type of content you'd like to see me create next. That's all for this one, and I'll see you in the next video.